We're here today to get a presentation at the Bondi Promenade of Fashion on the Promenade, presented by Waverley. With a few people here today looking at the history of Bondi and its fashion. So we'll present this at a later date. And I hope you enjoy the presentation for all your expats and all your people around the world who actually look at Bondi.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to commence this afternoon by recognising the traditional owners of the lands on which we're gathered, the Gadigal, Bidigal and Berribidigal people of the Eora Nation and the Sydney coastal community. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that same respect for all Indigenous Australians today. Hi everyone, by way of introduction, and for those of you who don't know me, my name is Elizabeth Reedy and I'm the Senior Curator here at Waverley Council. It is an incredible privilege for us to welcome you all today to the first edition of the 2024 talk series curated by the Waverley Action Group in partnership with Waverley Council, and today's talk particularly Fashions on the Promenade. It's been a privilege to work with Waverley Action Group on this program, which is of course an incredible resident-led not-for-profit organisation that advocates for a very vibrant liberal municipality with a very specific focus on heritage, environment and community as their central ethos. If everyone could please put their hands together in warmth and appreciation for the chair of Waverley Action Group, Julie McAlpin, who will introduce today's special guest speaker.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Liz, for that warm welcome. And it's great to see so many of you here, so thank you. I'm pretty loud, so I don't know whether I need to be louder. But it is my great pleasure to introduce Margot Riley, who is a very, very special person. I've known Margot for a long, long time. I shouldn't say too long, really. Margot is a local. She, of course, is a fantastic curator and a local historian with specialities in dress, which should come as no surprise given the topic today. And of course she's got a long history, over 25 years working at the New South Wales State Library. Not sure whether it's a State Metro Library or is it just the State Library. Margot and I have a lot in common actually. We went to school together. We went to university together. And unbeknownst to us, we both ended up in America at the same time. But unlike me, Margot went on to do some wonderful things in the world of curating and history, and it's just by chance that I ended up in Waverley working with the Historical Society and others who are interested in local history. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Margot. You're going to be in very safe hands. Just before I do though, I've just noticed Margot will be filmed and we may take some photos for publication in the future, so let me know if you don't want your photos taken. So over to you, Margot. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Is that level good? Can everyone hear me? Is that fine? No.
A little bit louder.
It needs to be louder. Okay. I wonder if that's better. Is that better?
Yes.
Is that better? Okay. I am pretty loud too, so that's good. Okay. Yes, and I also would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present and to any First Nations people in the audience. As we gather to share stories and knowledge, let us reflect on the incredible history of storytelling and creativity in this place. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. So it's wonderful to be able to come to the pavilion today. I came first with Julie a couple of months ago and I hadn't been since its wonderful transformation. As Julie said, we were both Dover Heights girls, so the pavilion was certainly a backdrop to many days at the beach, but certainly not in its magnificent form that we see today. But the beach and Sydney beaches in particular have always been such an important part of our city and how we feel about our city. And they've had incredible impact on the way our lifestyles. So I just thought I'd start by sort of putting the beach well and truly in fashion. This is actually the parade that Karl Lagerfeld staged in the Pitti Palace in Paris in 2019, where he actually recreated a beach inside the building, and that's where he did his resort showing for that year. So we're going from that to 19th century Sydney and to the location where we are today. So this is, these maps are showing you the Bondi estate, which at that time was privately owned. The land was privately owned. And nice to think you could own Bondi, isn't it? And also, as growing up as a, as a local, I never understood, it didn't occur to me that the names of the streets actually had connection to those first owners, those first European owners, not unfortunately acknowledging the traditional owners of the land at that time. So when we see on a map Hall Street and O'Brien Street, and in those days there was a Georgiana Street and also a Sophia Street, they actually connected to the people who had first settled, Europeans who had settled in this area. So there's a wonderful quote which is actually from the Bondi website, which I had a look at because the Stories website is a fantastic resource for anybody wanting to get a sense of the development of Bondi. And it's from James Martin, which written in about 1838. It says, any person who has a few hours to spare could not spend them more profitably or more delightfully than by visiting Bondi. To those who prefer spending their leisure hours in extravagance and dissipation and never experience the enjoyment afforded by gazing attentively upon the beauty and the sublimity of nature, I would earnestly recommend to walk along South Head Road to the shores of the Pacific. The last time I visited Bondi, I sat myself on a small tuft of grass a few yards from the beach, and I shall never forget the ideas that crowded vividly upon my mind. It was early in the morning and a light breeze was blowing across the waters, the surface of which was barely agitated by a gentle rippling. The undulating well from the ocean is never entirely free and had a particularly serene and beautiful appearance. So I think that's sort of quite a nice picture to evoke what it must have been like for the O'Brien family who took up residence at their property known as the Homestead. So from the previous, the circle that's on the map is where the homestead was located. And of course it's bordered by O'Brien Street and Georgiana Street. So the O'Brien family, they were related to Edward Smith Hall, who was a editor of a Sydney newspaper. But there was a lot of, the family were quite sickly. Women in particular, there was a lot of tuberculosis. So of course the sea air was considered to be a much more healthy atmosphere and environment for them. So they were encouraged to move to the sea, to the beach. And that's what they did. And I love this little drawing of the homestead here. And you can see the little group of, the little group of on horseback going for a very energising ride. And then these images here, these are actually taken at Rouse Hill House. I don't know whether you're aware of that. And these are taken by a family member known as Major Wingate. And he was an amateur photographer quite early. So the top image is taken in 1859 and the bottom one in 1860. But it gives you a sense of the kinds of clothing that the women in particular would have been wearing as they went on their walks and strolls around Bondi Beach at this time. And of course they would have worn similar outfits to ride because they would have been not astride, they would have been sitting in a side saddle, but still in very full skirts. Many people think that a crinoline is ridiculous for women to exercise in, but actually women at the time loved them because prior to that their skirts had been held out with very heavy petticoats, and a crinoline actually supported the weight of the petticoat from the waist, and it gave them a lot of room so they could stride out. And they actually really missed the crinoline when it went out of fashion, because following the 1860s, the skirts became narrower and narrower. So when I was preparing this talk, it's always funny how you get this synchronicity about things you've done in the past. And one of the most satisfying jobs or tasks that I've had at the library was I was doing some research into memorial fashion. What did people wear in the Victorian times to commemorate the passing of a loved one? And I was looking into this, and I found a reference to a painting that had been created of a young woman who died in Sydney from a death mask. So the artist had actually used a death mask to create the modelling of the face. And I was like, oh, I wonder where that painting is. And of course I typed it into the library catalogue, and it was downstairs in our wonderful storage area. So I had an amazing opportunity over about a 2-year period to bring this painting out of the stack. It was in very poor condition. It had been purchased from the family, like the great-grandson, in the 1970s, and has now been fully restored by, we found a descendant who has supported the restoration. So it's been a really wonderful full circle story. And in doing the research, as I say, her husband published a newspaper, and when she died, he printed the death notice in the paper, but he put a black border all the way around the paper. Now that was only ever done for a king or a head of state. And I didn't realise that when I was doing my research, but when I brought the newspaper in from off-site and opened it out and saw these heavy black, mourning borders around the paper, it was really quite extraordinary. Here was him expressing the loss, his mourning for the loss of his wife. She was only young, she was only 21 years old, likely to have had TB. She had had a young son, he was only 6 months old when she passed. And subsequent to her death, her husband married her sister, which was quite common in the time. Her sister had moved in to help look after the family, and Georgiana and Francis ended up marrying. And they're all buried together in the Waverley Cemetery. So we were able to unlock all of that story from this painting that was in the library's collection. And it has, that painting hung in the homestead, because it was brought here, it was hung in Bondi with both the second wife and the husband together at the homestead. As time goes by, as I said, the crinoline dropped away, and this is actually the image on the two ladies is showing what you would wear to go walking. These are walking dresses. What's wonderful about this particular image is that you can, because they're twins, they're sisters, and they're wearing the same dress, so they've posed themselves front and back. So you can actually see what the back of the dress looks like as well as the front. And these are the Halloran sisters. They are Mrs. Alice and Margaret Halloran. Margaret was known as the White Rose of Sydney. She was considered to be the most beautiful woman in Sydney. And you can see that they've accessorised with different hats. So that's what's the distinguishing feature. And this is what you would wear to go for your afternoon or beach walk. You can see this beautiful view. It's an afternoon view by Charles Condor, and it's taken from the heights of Bellevue Hill, so probably just above the Bondi, looking towards Sydney Harbour. And then the gentleman on the other side is dressed appropriately to escort the ladies on their constitution. At this time, there was very little bathing. Men might go and bathe, but very, very few women bathed. If they did, they might go into a creek, but very few went ocean bathing. At this stage, it was mostly just walking by the beach. And Coogee was a very prominent area at this time. It was being promoted as a resort, for people to go. And there was sorry, I'm trying to think of the name of the palace, that's right. Yeah. It was, sorry, I've lost my place. Yeah, the aquarium. Yeah, so there was the Coogee Aquarium and the swimming pool. They were opened in 1887, which you think is quite early, but that was an indoor swimming pool at that stage. And the Promenade was built at that time. So that's where people went to. If anybody's been watching The Gilded Age at all, you get that sense of that public strolling. It was very important, that promenading. It was called promenading. It was where you showed off your most, attractive gown, and it was, you met people. This is how it was part of your social interaction. This wonderful little painting at the bottom of the screen shows that it was also where you could ride. These ladies are, in riding habits, so they're riding a side saddle again in their very fitted riding habits. The paintings at the top just show you that people were going to the beach, they were sitting at the beach, they were enjoying the sun, though with a parasol usually. But you can see how ridiculously dressed they were at this time, very, very fitted. The hats were not large, they weren't even shady at this time, so you did need a parasol. And very tightly booted and gloved. because you had to keep your hands small and your feet small. That was a sign of gentility, and the way to do that was to not wear thongs or bare feet or anything like that. You actually had to, it was almost like Chinese foot binding. You really had to be careful how you used your hands and your feet, and you didn't want any suntan. Suntan was also a sign of working class people, so you shaved as much as possible. You kept yourself out of the sun. The other images are just showing you, I love the sort of play clothes of the Dangar brother and sister in the middle here. So they're, in that wonderful college kind of striped blazer, and then she's in her little, that's probably like a little tennis outfit. Can you imagine playing tennis in that? And then the one next door, she's actually holding her racket. And then the ladies on the end, by this time they're getting a little bit more ease in the top of their sleeves, but it's still a very fitted and of course totally corseted look. And this is how you would be. If you were in the house, you would not perhaps wear a corset. You could wear a lighter garment and a wrapper, which is a bit like a lightweight dress. But once you were outside, you would normally be corseted at all times. So Bondi continued to, at this stage it was being subdivided, there were sales of the property, the O'Briens had definitely moved on, and you may be aware of course that there was an amusement park that was located up at Tamarama. So this was a very popular place for people to come. Also by this time there was public transport. The trams and the omnibuses were bringing people out to the beach, and it was free. So you know, beyond the tram price of the tram fare, it was somewhere where you could come, and all classes could come and actually enjoy the beach and the environment. I think that's very much a part of the importance of the beach in Australian lifestyles, because that's not the case overseas. In America and in Europe, a lot of the beaches were privatised and you couldn't access it. It was only a certain class that could access the beach, and that's never really been the case here, which is fantastic. So the Tamarama was first called the Royal Aquarium and Pleasure Ground, and it was where the Surf Life Saving Club stands at Tamarama Park now. It burnt down, unfortunately, but it had the most wonderful array of activities. There was this steam-driven miniature railway, there was an artificial lake, there was a roller skating rink, a shooting gallery, which was operated by electric light, and there was a surf gymkhana. Carnivals were also held there. It was eventually replaced by a place which became known as Wonderland City, and that's how many people might remember it as Wonderland City. The garments that I've included here, these just show you that the sleeves have lightened up. You can much more full sleeve. Everything's cotton, which so it would be much more comfortable. The clothing is not a dress anymore. Usually it's in three parts. So you have a blouse, a skirt, and a jacket. So you can actually layer and take things off. It's much better than to cope with the change of temperature. And then, of course, always the hats are becoming very important. So we're getting more, broader brims, and again, they're really important to have a parasol to protect you from the sun. In 2014, another source of amazing detail about Bondi and Sydney in general came to the library with this collection of 688 glass plate negatives. These were actually taken by an amateur photographer. So these are not something that were shot by a professional and available to the general public. This is a private family collection. They've been taken by two brothers who were gentlemen. They had property, they lived in Wallara, they were well-to-do. And so this collection was given to the library, and it's the most extraordinary documentation of this time in Sydney where people are discovering the beach. So you have this wonderful automobile here. This is the Martin McPherson family members in their Clement Ganard dog cart automobile from about 1904. So they would have driven over from their home in Wallara. This is the house down here, which was for Thorndon, that is in Rosendale Avenue in Wallara. So they would have motored from home down to the beach, and Mr. McPherson would have had his camera equipment in the back of the car. And this is just it gives you an idea. These ones are probably not taken at Bondi. They're three daughters, or family members, I should say. And this is that very elaborate kind of bathing dress, which you couldn't do any kind of proper swimming in these outfits. They were really just for, splashing around in. But they look incredibly decorative. And it's wonderful to have this beautiful image of these three sort of maidens, in this sort of sylvan setting. There was a lagoon at Bondi, so it's possible that maybe people did go paddling around in the lagoon. Also, of course, you would go picnicking, and this is a wonderful photo of three family members. Mr. McPherson, who takes a lot of the photos, is the gentleman on this side with the moustache, and he's actually got his camera equipment, a collapsible camera, just sitting in the front of him here, and just sort of sandish under a rock ledge, like a beach picnic that they might have had. But that's how they would have dressed to go to the beach, fully dressed like this. It's also in this, because this is before the legalisation of bathing during daylight hours. That didn't really come around until after 1904. So you see that they're fully dressed and they're paddling. There's nobody that's actually in the water swimming. And that's a very clear indicator of that it's this legitimate swimming quarter. Men could swim after dark, but it was very not acceptable during the day. And you can just see the lavishness of what they're wearing, the different views. The one at the top, I'm terrible with my left and right. This one over here has the tram up the top. You can see right at the top right-hand corner. So that's the tram at the loop, which is just sort of up behind where the pavilion is. That's where the loop was. And then the other side is showing you the baths. That's showing you the Bondi baths up there. And this one I like in the front here because the young girl in the middle is a member of the McPherson family. But she's actually looking at the camera. She's the only person in any of the photos that's looking at the camera because she knows that her uncle is taking the photo. And at that time people were totally unaware, unless you really made a fuss about it, they didn't know if someone put something up, their photograph was being taken. So you're getting these wonderful types of photos where people are not posing, really very relaxed, doing their own thing. These are at Coogee, and you can see the Coogee Pavilion in the middle there. And also there was the promenade was built at Coogee, and this is the wall of the promenade coming sweeping around, still there today. And that was a place where people did strip off and strip down so they could paddle. And you can see this, and they have picnics on the rocks as well. So you get to see some great shots of what was under their clothes. So that's why these images are so fantastic, because they're really giving you so much information. Because they're glass plate as well, when you scan them, there's so much information. You can blow them up massively. And I spent about 6 weeks just sort of staring at each one, just trying to work out exactly where they were, because none of them were identified. So we had to identify them all and date them based on the information that we can see. This one is one of my all-time favourites, because this is the beginning of proper swimwears. And this is actually probably not made by a professional. This would be something that's made at home, because she's wearing what's known as combinations, which was the basic form of underwear. And it was a chemise and knickers joined together at the waist. And somebody in the family has then thought, oh wow, I can make this into a swimsuit. So they've sewn up, normally they would be open at the crotch, so they would sew up the crotch and then trimmed with some braid to make it a bit sporty. And it's just the most fabulous image of her wet, how it just absolutely unique. And then on the other side, of course, you've got the boys all splashing around in their woolen suits, because by this time, of course, there was purpose-made swimwear for the knitted swimwear. So you might be familiar with those that used to bag and droop. But also too, people didn't often own a swimsuit. People forget that a lot of people didn't own a swimsuit. And when they came to the beach, they would actually rent a swimsuit. So as I say, public transport made a big difference, bringing people out to the beach. So on the weekends, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people would be heading to a beach somewhere. The steam tram in the middle and the omnibus basically followed the 377 route. Yeah, 377 route that would bring them out to Bondi. And the little sketch there shows you the loop. So we were talking about the tram loop.
Yes.
So that was the terminus where the tram turned around. So once you got here, as I said, most people didn't have a swimsuit, so they could rent a swimsuit. You also, as I say, came fully dressed, so you needed somewhere to change. This is the changing shed. It's not the changing shed at Bondi. Unfortunately, we don't have photographs of the inside of the changing shed at Bondi. This is the one at Manly, but I don't think they would have been much different. And there's a most wonderful companion to this, which is the changing shed for the men. And there's a lot of nudity in that one. So I left it out just because I thought it's nice to see the girls' swimsuits and what they were changing out of. So these are taken in about 1907, and they're from an album that was owned by the Caird family. So these are the girls from the Caird family. And you can see it's a much more casual style of dress compared to those very carefully posed maidens by the side of the lagoon. These ones are actually going to get in water. They're much more active. And that was the part of that, the beginning of the 20th century when women were, getting jobs, going to university, and actually being much more physically active than perhaps they have been in the past. I love to include this one, the girls on the merry-go-round, because I think, that's the kind of activity that would have been going on at Wonderland at this time. And then you have the contrast with this very elegant young woman standing on the veranda of the home. But again, the same kind of profile of gown and these wonderful big hats. So this is about 1910, and this is, hats were serious business at this time. I don't think they were ever bigger than 1910. If you think of My Fair Lady and the scene at the Ascot, that's the same period that we're talking with these photos here. And this was the time when the O'Brien estate was being subdivided. And there's a wonderful little quote on the bottom of this plan. I'll just say the two girls on the merry-go-round are Lucy and Frida, and then the lady on the balcony is Marcel Boivin, who was the daughter of the secretary to the French consul. So you can understand why she's looking particularly chic. But the little plan, the subdivision plan, the quote at the bottom says, "The above sketch shows you plainer than any words can tell the perfect location of this splendid estate, the like of which is not to be found elsewhere in Sydney." And this is another, I love these subdivision plans because they really give you a feeling for what was the marketing, how Bondi was being promoted to people, because it was at this time that a lot of the properties around here were being bought up and people were moving to the beach to build their own home. And then of course you see the traffic along Campbell Parade here with cars, because of course by the 1920s this car ownership has increased, and you can see this sort of idea of how busy it might have been along Campbell Parade back at the time, with also the trams, because of course we don't have trams coming down here anymore. I don't think anybody would remember a tram coming down to Bondi.
Oh, of course
We do.
do.
There you go. Well done. Because I don't remember.
Weekend.
Very good. I just love to pop in these little brochures and things, so they add a pop of colour. This wonderful one which is promoting Bondi as the playground of the Pacific, and of course that use of the pavilion in the background. The Bondi Pavilion, of course, was designed and completed in the 1920s. The library's actually just purchased a wonderful watercolour by Phyllis Choleteau of the pavilion just after it was completed. So it really was an important addition to the amenity of the beach. And these are the kinds of activities or outfits that might have been seen in the beach. We have the wonderful Annette Kellerman there. She, of course, is in a very streamlined, knitted swimsuit, and she's carrying a Japanese sunshade. There was a lot of wearing of kimonos as cover-ups in this period. There was like an Orientalism and an Oriental fashion for beautiful silk kimonos or cotton kimonos worn over the swimwear. I love these girls at the bottom. I don't know if you've ever seen the film Some Like It Hot with Tony Curtis.
Yes.
This is what they were modelled on. It's an all-girl band. They were called the Ingenues, and they were from Chicago, and they travelled out to Sydney in 1920. I think it was 28, and this is them at Central Station. So they would have come to the beach in a flash. And I just love this sort of array of outfits, because this is real. This is not fashion.
And I think that's really important. The imagery that we see in magazines and in posed fashion photographs really doesn't tell you how people really looked at the time. So this is them, they're having a great time, they're on tour, and they're ready to go. And even the fact that they're carrying their luggage and they've got the instruments. One of them's got this fabulous ladder in a tie, it's just so good. And then this wonderful shot at the beach on the side, which really again shows you the beach in activity. There's people just milling around, and some dressed, some in their swimsuits, really great action shot. And the tan, because this is of course the first time that people went and tanned themselves. And of course, who started the fashion for a tan? Gabrielle Chanel. She was down in the Mediterranean, she got a tan, she didn't mean to, and of course she made it fashionable. Everyone after that was like, well, I better get one too. Also sunglasses, she was wearing sunglasses, so photographs of her wearing trousers and sunglasses and with suntan went around the world, and of course that really turned things around. People who've been protecting themselves from the sun all of a sudden went the other way, unfortunately. And of course clothing changed because people wanted to have a tan. Their clothing made that more possible. These sort of backless swimsuits were made by Janssen. They had these straps that you could take away so that you could have no marks on the back. Of course at this time women's dresses were also backless. There was a lot of backless bias cut fashion in the 1930s, so you didn't want tan lines on your back. And then again, as I say, a lot of these girls are wearing shady hats, but there's a real eclectic array of clothing being worn to the beach. Swimsuit underneath, and then blouses and skirts and shorts and pants just sort of layered up so that you could just get yourself basically from the tram to the beach perhaps without having to go and change, whatever you chose. And then this I love because this is Hollywood glamour at the beach. So this is Helen Twelvetrees. She was brought out from Hollywood to star in the movie, it was called Thoroughbred. Why didn't I remember that? And it was basically a tale, and this is a quote, a tale of an ugly horse's rise to fame, modelled on Australian legend Father. Ugly horses rise to fame. What a mean thing, because he was considered to be a very ugly red horse. So anyway, Helen was brought out to Australia by the filmmaker Kenji Hall, and this is them at Bondi, sort of scoping out the beach. And look at her in her fabulous trousers and that wonderful little beret. So really great, and sitting astride like that. Like it's just so. And then wonderful shot, of course, showing you the pavilion as it would have been at the time. Oh, sorry. I just love this woman in the big hat. Look at her. She is looking askance. She's like, what's going on there? And you sort of think, wonder who she is. I don't know who she is. Is she Mrs. Hall? She's sort of looking a little bit. Either that or she doesn't approve of the pants and the sitting with the neck apart. I don't quite know. And this is another lovely character who I don't know whether you've ever heard of. Her name is Pearl Zweig. She was born in Bondi and in 1918 and to a Polish tailor and a London dressmaker who had a store in George Street. And she got her big break when her photograph was sent to the 1937 Miss Bondi Surf Queen competition, and she won. And it was at this time that Norman Lindsay saw her photograph in the paper and asked her to be a model. They ended up, of course, having quite a steamy affair, and she does feature in quite a few of his paintings. And then she had a bit of a movie career again with Mr. Kenji Hall in Tall Timbers and Let George Do It, in which she appeared in swimming scenes. And she married. Her husband was a hypnotist and owned horse races, as you do. And then after his death, she moved to America and she met Sidney Goldman, Vice President of Radio City Music Hall, which is where she lived to the end of her life. So this is her wedding ensemble in the blue to her first husband. It's gorgeous. She was a knocker. And I remember when she retired back to Australia at the end of her life, and she came into the library to donate her pictures to the collection. So she was still a very, very striking lady, and she was, gosh, she must have been in her late 90s then. So this is just showing you an array of different outfits, kinds of styles that people would have been wearing. Skirts were very long in the early 30s and then rose steadily up through the decade, certainly getting shorter and shorter as you go into wartime restrictions. There was also shorts, play suits, divided skirts, all sorts of things that meant girls could play. They were play clothes. And a lot of this was influenced by Hollywood because you were seeing actresses like Jean Harlow and anyway, I cannot remember, doesn't matter, I'll move along. But they were all these actresses that were just, playing and being naughty and sassy. And so it encouraged Australian girls to do the same. And if they could see it on the screen at the cinema, then 2 minutes later they were wearing it. It was really the quickest way to communicate fashion at the time, much quicker than a magazine, because of course you were seeing clothes in action. And women were making their own clothes, so they would get patterns out of magazines and make things for themselves very, very quickly. Didn't have to wait for the shops to catch up. I love this. This is from Pix magazine. It's a wonderful resource because it tells you so much about what's going on in Sydney. It was a pictorial news magazine that was running from 1938 through to late to the 1970s, and it really was targeted to the everyday person. It wasn't highbrow in the least, and it was everything was shot from their offices in Sydney. They had an office in Castlereagh Street, and they'd have their meeting, and they'd go, okay, we're going to have an article about this, and they'd send their photographers out, and they'd shoot everything. So it's really fresh. The images are amazing. So we have the newspaper at the library, but we also acquired the negative archive. So that was about, 5, 10 years ago now, and it's all been digitised. So you can actually go online, find these amazing images, and then if you go to Trove, where all the magazines are digitised, you can match up the image to the story. And so often the picture will be, oh my God, that's fantastic, but who is it? What are they doing? And then you can go to the story and get the context. I'm actually doing an exhibition about Pix magazine for the library that will open in December in our new photography gallery. So I'm very excited about Pix at the moment. Now the picture I'm showing you here, this is another innovation because at this time there were strict rules about what you could wear to the beach and the kinds of suits, how much flesh you could show, all of those things. So in 1938, a group of Canadian swimmers came to Sydney for the Empire Games, and the girls were all wearing these swimsuits, which were known as Canadian swimsuits. And of course they were illegal to wear in New South Wales at the time because of the amount of flesh that they showed. But they were considered to be really great because you could adjust them. So if you were feeling a bit, heavier one day, you could just loosen up your lacings on the side. They also came in 2 models, 2-piece and 1-piece. So you could wear a 2-piece at the time. It was the fact that the flesh was being shown at the sides that was considered to be too saucy. Everyone got over it, so that's fine. And this picture on the, this way, sorry, is a beautiful girl called Valmain Ma. And she was a very beautiful model in Sydney at the time. And here she is in this knockout of a shot, enjoying the sun, catching a few rays on Bondi. And then Pix has all these crazy articles about they love the beach. And one of the favourite photographers, a man, the one-eyed photographer Ivan Ive. Like you couldn't make it up. Anyway, he photographed all the girls and he did all the beach shoots, and he's one of my favourites. So he would go down and do all of these shoots. So there were all sorts of ideas, marketing ideas. This is showing you the igloos, the little igloos that people put up on the beach. So you often see the back of them, but you don't often see the underside. So this is a great little shot because it shows you that. And the great little bag here with all of her, beachside accoutrement, everything she needed to go to the beach, a little portable kit. And then this one here, where the girls tattoo their boyfriend's picture on their bag, or the guy that they like at the movies or whatever. So you cut out the picture of the boyfriend and you put it on, and it creates this sort of silhouette on your back. I don't know, maybe people would do that these days, I'm not sure. They just put a tattoo, a real tattoo. So in more and more, I'm just going to show you a bunch of these because they give you so much detail. This is a group of girls coming to a surf carnival at Bondi in 1938, and you see the detail of their shorts and their shoes, and there's just so much information for filmmakers. anybody trying to get a sense of how people really looked at the time. And then I love these guys on the side. So the lady at the top, she's wearing a Canadian suit. You can see the lacings on the side. And then the guys in the front here, they're frying eggs on the concrete. Bit hot that day, I guess. So this was all in December 1938. And Cleo was mentioning that we have this wonderful collection at the library, which is the work of George Caddy. So he was a young pattern maker who lived in Bondi, but he was also a dancer, a jitterbug dancer, and a photographer. And again, it must have been about 2010, I'm not quite sure of the date, his son donated a big collection of his father's photographs to the library, and they are extraordinary documents of Bondi in the 1940s and the youth culture on Bondi. So this is a wonderful shot of the promenade in winter. So it's nice to sort of think about the beach being used not only in summertime but all year round. And this is George here with his camera. He lived in Bennett Street, and this is at home with his camera. The most curious coincidence, the curator of photography at the library has this camera. He bought it at auction, had no idea that it had actually belonged to George until this collection came in, and they were able to work out that it was exactly the same camera. So it's amazing how these things come together. So George, as I say, was a great dancer, and these are shots of him dancing on the promenade. We have the Lido dance hall on this one, and then in the summertime. I love this again. The girl's wearing, it was called a house coat, and she's just put that over her dress, and she's come down to the beach. Wonderful espadrille laced up sandals. And look at him with his beautiful leather sandals. It's so chic, so chic. And yes, they weren't well to do. This was all done, do it yourself fashion and style. And then of course we have them mucking around, and then the girls in winter. So this is what you would wear to the beach in winter, including your fur coat if you had one. What is interesting too about George is because he was very sort of fashion conscious and worked in the garment industry, he was an early adopter of new trends, and one of them was for American athletic wear. So here he's wearing a sweatshirt, so the snappy toe, and you can really see the example in the middle, because it's all being signed by his friends from the dance company, and then a wonderful ad from the newspapers showing you the same kind of athletic wear being sold in Sydney at the time. So these were developed in America. A network company developed it for baseball players and football players, and then of course from college wear it moved into mainstream line. Another one that is great because these were made in Australia. This is a Candlewick beach coat. Does anyone remember having a Candlewick beach coat? I had one in 1960 with my initial embroidered on the pocket. So this is a girl called Roya Gill. She was another friend of George's, and she's wearing the Candlewick beach coat, and then you can see the ad. That's from In Colour, which is fantastic because it gives you all that information of what the colours would have been, and that's from the Women's Weekly. And then the one in the coat, that's actually from American Vogue. So it wasn't just something that was done in Australia, it was actually an international fashion, and it was part of make, do and mend in the war when textiles were in short supply. People used bedspreads. Now moving rapidly along, because I know I don't want to run out of time, but I love this series. This is 1947. Look at those little girls, aren't they sweet? Yes. And then you've got the boys, again, this American styles where they're sort of rolling up the hems of their pants, taking off their shirts, and they're just really, striding along. Gorgeous girls coming down the steps from the promenade. Yeah, it's just wonderful stuff. You can't get beyond this series. This one, boys sitting on the railing, watching it go by. The one with the Turkish bath sign, that's actually Max Trapane. And then this is inside the pavilion. You can see them getting their swimsuits, and then going to the snack bar, getting a hot dog, and then being sprayed.
Yes, I remember that oil.
Great. And then colour. We were lucky that, 50s brought colour, some stunning images. These are actually not in the library's collection, which is very sad, but I wanted to put in a pop of colour because, of course, we can't think about what people were doing and wearing without imagining the colour. And certainly the beach, that's where people wore more colour, they wore more pattern. The Hawaiian prints started to come in. You get all sorts of different fabrications. There were locally screen printed textiles that were being used in leisure wear. And fabrics were designing, and shirts for men, leisure shirts for men. So you always have to think of the colour. And then this I love. Aren't they glamorous? Aren't they gorgeous? They're all Miss Bondi candidates. Yes. So this was.
Did they say where it was?
Let me just. That's the State Theatre.
Oh, I thought that's what I was going to ask.
I'm just gonna find. Here we are.
That looks like our
It's called Bondi Beauty is Everywhere, and these girls were all entered in the Bondi Miss Pacific competition. Age and also their physical characteristics. The usherette was blue-eyed brunette Shirley Bazile of Bronte. We have Julie Warren, who was the secretary. She actually was crowned Miss Pacific. She's a green-eyed redhead, and she's the one in the middle. I love the telephonist. There's also Jan Mitchell, the office girl from North Bondi, and there's a clerk. She was another brownette, as they call them, not a brunette, a brownette. She likes swimming, tennis, jitterbug dancing, and dislikes smoking, and is trying to prevent her boyfriend from acquiring the habit. So she's very, very good. And then Gwen Bond, who's the baths attendant. So she's the one giving out the swimsuits here.
Yep. Yes.
So again, really great to be able to have these items. They're real people. They're not just models. So speaking of that, we do have a young model, and this is a teenage model from Bondi. Her name was Diane Nixon, and she was actually at Eastern Sydney Tech. She was studying fashion, and she wanted to be a model. And then she was headed to Paris. She was already doing work as a model, and after this summer she was heading over to Paris to do modelling in Paris. And the view from her apartment shows you the beach behind. She's at Bondi, and then of course she's walking the dog. But of course, one of the most important fashion figures probably for Bondi is Beryl Gents, because she had opened her business in Waverley. She was one of the most important Sydney fashion designers because she was quite radical, went ahead of trends. And that's exactly what's being said in this press release for her collections. It's reproduced here. These are just a couple of examples of her clothing. These are held at the Powerhouse Museum, and we have a lovely photo of Beryl there with one of the most important clients, Mrs. Betty McInerney, who was head like a really top of the tree in Sydney society, and Beryl had made her wedding dress. This is a wonderful wedding dress. I remember seeing this wedding dress when it first went into the Powerhouse collection, and it's truly amazing. All of those flowers, three-dimensional roses, just all made, most beautiful. So this was in 1952, and the Powerhouse also has this wonderful scrapbook that Beryl put together of all her work. She was in business for over 60 years. Really long career. She must have been good. I'd just like to pop this in because, of course, department stores, how important were they for keeping fashionable? You would have to, not everybody made, not everybody sewed, not everybody could afford Beryl Gents, which was by the architect Laurie Della, and it's in the library's collection, so 1954. And my first job was in that department store, in ladies' better dresses, turning all the coat hangers around, making sure all the swing tickets lined up. There was also a club on the beach for mothers, so this is the ladies' swimming club, and I think these are wonderful, these photos, so I do encourage you to just explore what's on the website. And these are just three sisters who lived in Bondi. I don't know anything more about them, but that they were the Johnson sisters. This is 1958. You can just see so much information. In the late 60s, we start to see
split because you get teen culture really coming to the fore. So while we've got that glamorous kind of beehive, more sort of structured fashion for women, teenagers are coming to the fore. And these two couples dancing here doing the stomp. I don't know if you remember the stomp. That was the big surf dance. And they're at Surf City, which was up in King's Cross. And the boy in the t-shirt which says Stomp Crazy is a young boy called Tim Crockett of Greenwich. I wonder where he is. I always wonder, where is Tim? And of course, you know, key figures still, you know, the Flamingo Park parades were held down here. Wonderful shots of Jenny Keane, Linda Jackson, shot at the beach by William Yang and also their photographer Annie Noon. A range of looks. It wasn't just, you know, Australiana. The beginning of their looks was very 40s, very retro, and you can imagine they must have been looking at old photographs and of Bondi and seeing the way people dressed at the beach as well, and then creating their own versions. And then I'm just wrapping up with this shot, which was taken last year at Fashion Week in Bondi, because there was a big parade that was down on the sand, and there was events down up at Icebergs. So this is just some of the street fashion that was around in Bondi during Fashion Week last year. So I hope that whirlwind lightning parade has been something that you've been interested to know about, and I'd love to take questions if you have any.
Thank you. For that, and Margot, I'm very pleased that small feet and hands aren't in fashion anymore.
Me too.
But on behalf of Waverley Action Group, I would like you to present you with a very small token.
Lovely, thank you.
So thank you very much. And of course, these talks don't happen by themselves. So I'd like to thank my colleague at the back, Kate Marshall, who is with me, part of Waverley Action Group. And I'd also like to thank Liz from the, I was going to say Bondi Story Room, but from Waverley Council. And also I'd like to give a bit of a shout out to Bendigo Bank, who has provided some support to allow us to continue running talks, which is a nice reminder that I hope you will join us on the 11th of April, where we will have a talk which is called Signals and Sirens by Wireless, who is a mystery presenter. Some of you probably do know who he is. He's a historian, a local who's got an interest in postcards and trams. He's a wonderful speaker. We have heard him before, so I do hope you come along to that. And then again on the 18th of April, we have an author, Ross McMullen, who is going to come and talk about his latest book, which is entitled, well, not the book, but the talk's entitled Forgotten War Stories and Cricket Sensations. Now, he's a really interesting person as well, because he's taken a lot of research from around this area, and it's focused on young cricket players, one in particular from Waverley, who unfortunately was sent off to World War I and didn't come back, but it's a really interesting story. So I hope you can come and join us. This will be circulated through Waverley Council and also through Waverley Action Group. So thank you. We do have some...